If you are a researcher, you know that you basically have two jobs to build a career. One, writing good proposals. And two, making your research and sharing your outputs. Now, imagine that you have worked hard for months to write a research proposal for a public call. And this is not a short proposal, but is 70 pages long, including international partners and cost breakdowns. You submit the project and it gets rejected, but not because it wasn't good, but because of a misunderstanding, or rather a hidden rule. Take these apples, for example. And let's say that Europe makes a call for new techniques to grow apples. And you present an innovative idea for this green apple. And after the rejection, they tell you that only red apples were admitted. Sounds weird, right? I applied to a European public call for sustainable innovation with an awesome project supported by initiatives like the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development and Startup Europe. And that's exactly what happened to me. And this makes you wonder, is Europe serious about sustainability? Or are mistakes and power games sabotaging our goals? I'm here to show you exactly what happened and why it matters. In 2019, I was finishing my PhD, and it's very difficult to find opportunities in research, like postdocs. So I was looking for alternative options. And it is at that moment that I had an idea on how to reshape how information about culture moves throughout Europe. Culture is a key part of the United Nations SDGs, and it helps build a better society for the future. You know, I come from a small town of 20,000 people, and I know that when you are a child, you would like to have more cultural products available. This is a main problem connected to the increasing phenomenon of ghost towns, and bottom-up, community-driven initiatives can offer powerful support. The idea was simple: connect new cultural audiences with cultural events to promote urban and cultural regeneration. However, you cannot do that alone. You don't really want to cut off cultural organizations like universities and theaters, but what you really want to do is to empower them to act more efficiently in the territory. So everything is about how to provide useful information, and the idea was about that. This idea soon started to get recognition for its design by important startup competitions in Europe. The project was initially recognized among the top 3 ideas on circular creative industries and social innovation at the Click Startup competition, which was part of the Horizon 2020 program, one of the biggest research programs in Europe. Judges were from important international organizations like the Italian National Research Center, OECD, or Trans-Europe HALES. The Click project focused on heritage adaptive reuse for urban development, which is a key part of Europe's new European Bauhaus program. Then the project was supported as one of Italy's best startup ideas by the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development. This is an important organization in Italy with about 270 members and a very respectable scientific board composed of these renowned professionals. Consider that their scientific director, Enrico Giovannini, was recently named as one of the 14 international experts chosen by the United Nations to find new ways to measure global well-being. But even more importantly, the idea was recognized among the top 4 projects at the Startup Europe Accelerator, an initiative that is part of Startup Europe. And Startup Europe is a program created by the European Commission itself to promote projects that specifically support Europe's priority goals. In 2021, a new call opened from Creative Europe called the Creative Innovation Lab. This program wanted to support ideas that promoted cross-sectoral cooperation within the creative and cultural sectors, including the audiovisual sector, have the potential for market penetration, had a focus on data collection and analysis with particular emphasis on prediction for content creation and audience development, and were contributing to the European Bauhaus project. Since the program focused on cross-sectoral cooperation, I chose to mention the Science Gallery to exemplify the product concept, because such a network promotes innovative cross-sectoral products that include audiovisual as requested by the call. After about 3 months of hard work, I was finally ready to submit. Eventually, the project was rejected, and the weirdest part is that it was actually considered to be very good and well structured. The comment of the reviewers stated, "There is a good level of innovation and potential for cross-sectoral collaboration. However, the application fails to demonstrate how the audiovisual sector is integrated in the concept." Why? Because it's called the Science Gallery and not the Film Festival? For example, in Italy, a huge part of audiovisual contents are produced in music conservatoires, which are originally music schools. This is because the connection between music and audiovisual has historically been very strong. Think, for example, of Nam June-paik, who is sometimes considered the father of video art. He was a musician and sound designer before. Or Bill Viola, who was also a sound artist and designer before becoming one of the most important video artists of our time. Now, for the European law, you are allowed to ask for re-evaluation if there was a factual or manifest error that greatly impacted the final decision. Complaints must focus on aspects concerning the evaluation of the proposal, in example, the admissibility or eligibility checks, evaluation procedure, etc., not their merits. Thus, applicants can raise procedural irregularities, factual errors, manifest errors of assessment, or abuse of power, in example, lack of coherence between scores and comments, or lack or inadequate reasoning of the conclusion, etc. If we ask Gemini about the difference between factual and manifest error, it says that a factual error is a straightforward, verifiable mistake regarding the facts of the case. It's about something being objectively true or false. It's a demonstrable misstatement or misrepresentation of a piece of information that was available or should have been known. If we go down, a manifest error is described as a judgment based on clearly insufficient or irrelevant information given the evidence that was available. And that if they made a judgment that was demonstrably flawed because their definition was flawed and uncommunicated, leading to an unreasonable conclusion about your project's content. With just one line, that comment completely disqualified the entire proposal, resulting in a weight of minimum 31 points and dropping us immediately below the 70-point threshold, since this comment basically says that we didn't meet the minimum requirements for funding. So I sent a request for re-evaluation to the Creative Innovation Lab. They tried to justify their decision by stating that with audiovisual sector they meant feature films, animation, and creative documentaries intended primarily for cinematic release, fiction, audiovisual works, animation and creative documentaries, interactive, non-linear fiction, animation or creative documentary projects, narrative video games, and interactive narrative immersive experiences. I therefore pointed out to the manager of the Creative Innovation Lab that this restriction was not mentioned in the guidelines. Do you remember the definition of manifest error? It said a definition that is uncommunicated. In the end, my complaint went higher up to the head of unit of the Media Strand of Creative Europe, and here there were two options at disposal. Option 1. If the audiovisual sector was indeed included, then the comment of the reviewer was a factual error. Option 2. If the audiovisual sector was not included, the Creative Innovation Lab made a manifest error by not reporting an eventual restriction in the guidelines as it impacted my application for reasons outside my control. To avoid admitting any type of error, the head of unit replied in this way. Firstly, the rejection letter you received states very precisely there is a good level of innovation and potential for cross-sectoral collaboration. However, the application fails to demonstrate how the audiovisual sector is integrated. Emphasis added. As it is evident, there is absolutely no mention that the audiovisual sector is not integrated in your project. On the contrary, by underlining the good level of cross-sectoral potential, the evaluation committee recognized that your project is of real interest to the audiovisual sector and other cultural sectors. In this respect, the sentence, "The application fails to demonstrate how the audiovisual sector is integrated in the concept," only suggests that your application suffers from a lack of precision and details in describing the conditions of integration of the audiovisual sector into your project. In this respect, as mentioned in your letter, it is correct that you mentioned the experience of the Science Gallery and IRCAM. However, these institutions are mentioned by way of example to illustrate the positioning of your concept. On the one hand, it is undeniable that these two sentences are not the same sentence. On the other hand, it is clear that they have the same effect on the evaluation of the project, as they both declare that the minimal requirement for funding was not met, which was the inclusion of the audiovisual sector. In no way any of these two sentences suggest that the audiovisual sector was only partially integrated. In particular, it doesn't make sense that the product concept was explained against the main example of the Science Gallery, and the reviewers acknowledged that the cultural and creative sector was correctly integrated, but they did not the same with the audiovisual sector. And in a complete twist of events, the head of unit was able to fully dodge the central question of my complaint, whether or not the audiovisual sector was included in the project. Now, if we take a look for a moment again at the accepted reasons for complaint about proposal rejection, we can read manifest errors of assessment or abuse of powers. In example, lack of coherence between scores and comments, or lack or inadequate reasoning of the conclusions. Given the inadequate reasoning provided by the head of unit, I have no fear in calling this a manifestation of power abuse by an officer of the ESEA. The main point of the story is that they punished a project that received so many good acknowledgements by such important initiatives connected to innovation and sustainability, eventually at the risk of promoting projects that were less innovative. This, let's clarify, acts against the interests of the European Commission itself. Therefore, I invite the European Parliament and the European Commission and the ESEA itself to seriously consider this problem and act. These forms of power abuse not only erode trust of citizens in public organizations, but also undermine the work and efforts of surrounding organizations like the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, who spend money and resources to identify and support promising projects for the benefits of everybody. I also invite such organizations to demand accountability in line with Article 41 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, which states that every person has the right to have his or her affairs handled impartially, fairly, and within a reasonable time by the institutions, bodies, offices, and agencies of the Union. And every person has the right to have the Union make good any damage caused by its institutions or by its servants in the performance of their duties, in accordance with the general principles common to the laws of the member states. Otherwise, it is unclear why should researchers and individuals apply to these public calls. Researchers choose to put so much effort in writing these proposals, expecting fairness and transparency. And furthermore, this episode highlights an even more important question, which is Europe serious about tackling sustainability? Because if one person is able to undermine a promising idea that received so many acknowledgements, then this may explain why the United Nations stated that only 17% of the planned SDGs will be reached by 2030. I will talk about this in a future video. And let me clarify, this is not a mistake of the European Union as a whole, but just of one of its departments. However, Europe must take accountability for these mistakes. So I really encourage the European Union and the ASEA to act in response to this problem, and I will inform you about any update. Let me know what you think in the comments, and remember to hit the subscribe button to be informed about future content on research, innovation and culture. And if you can share the video, that would really help me get the attention of Europe towards this problem. Also, please visit my GoFundMe profile in the description. I am trying to raise some funds to find a lawyer and understand if something can be done. And if you have any idea or you know somebody that might be able to help, please reach out or write it down in the comment section. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.